The sterile air of this airport boarding gate crackled with a sudden ugly tension. It started with a sneer, a condescending remark aimed at a black woman's accent. The passenger making the cruel joke saw only an easy target. What she couldn't see was the quiet authority simmering just beneath the surface. Because the woman she chose to ridicule wasn't just another traveler. She was a high-ranking FAA officer, and she was about to turn a simple act of prejudice into a breathtaking display of power. In a few moments, the flight wouldn't just be delayed, it would become the stage for an unforgettable lesson in karma. The fluorescent hum of the boarding gate at Los Angeles International Airport was a familiar symphony to Amelia Davies. Dressed in a smart, tailored navy suit, her carry-on briefcase resting neatly beside her, she exuded an air of quiet professionalism. Her dark, natural curls were pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and a pair of discreet wire-rimmed glasses framed her intelligent eyes. She was a woman who commanded respect without ever needing to demand it, though today that unspoken authority was about to be severely tested. Amelia was a senior air traffic control specialist with the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA), currently en route to a high-level conference in Washington, D.C. The flight United Airlines Flight 743 was scheduled for a direct cross-country journey. She had arrived early, as was her custom, and was engrossed in a technical report on her tablet, the jargon-filled pages a comfortable read. Around her, the usual pre-flight chaos unfolded. Hurried goodbyes, excited chatter, the occasional wail of a child. Amelia, however, remained a calm anchor in the swirling eddy of travelers. Her phone buzzed a text from her colleague, David Miller. "On my way to gate B23. See you soon." Amelia smiled faintly. David, a seasoned FAA inspector, was meeting her on this flight. They were presenting a joint paper at the conference. It was good to have a friendly face amidst the usual anonymity of air travel. As boarding began, Amelia tucked her tablet away and joined the queue. She was in Group 1, a benefit of her government travel status. Just ahead of her was a woman who seemed to embody a different kind of traveler entirely. Her name, Amelia would soon learn, was Brenda Holloway. Brenda was a woman in her late 40s, bedecked in an expensive-looking tracksuit, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, and a designer handbag tucked under her arm. She radiated an air of self-importance, frequently checking her reflection in her phone, and sighing dramatically at the perceived slowness of the line. Behind Amelia, a young couple whispered excitedly about their vacation. In front, Brenda was already causing a minor stir. "Honestly, can they not organize this better?" she huffed to no one in particular, loud enough for those around her to hear. "It's not rocket science." Amelia paid her no mind. She was focused on her boarding pass, ready to present it. When it was her turn, the gate agent, a kind-faced young man named Robert, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass and ID?" Amelia reached into her small purse. As she pulled out her wallet, her fingers fumbled slightly, and a small laminated FAA identification card slipped from its holder, landing silently on the carpeted floor. She didn't notice it immediately. "Here you go," Amelia said, her voice smooth with a subtle lilt that spoke of her West African heritage. It was a beautiful accent, musical, and distinct, a byproduct of her upbringing in Lagos before her family had immigrated to the United States when she was a teenager. She had worked hard to assimilate, to master American English, but some of the intonations, the rhythm of her mother tongue remained. It was a part of her, a part she cherished. Robert scanned her boarding pass. "Thank you, Ms. Davies. Seat 12A. Enjoy your flight." As Amelia stepped forward, Brenda Holloway, who had been impatiently waiting for Robert to finish, leaned in close to Amelia, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Oh, enjoy your flight," she says. With that interesting accent. Are you sure you're even on the right plane, darling? Sounds like you might be looking for a flight to, well, somewhere a bit more exotic. Brenda punctuated her sentence with a short, snickering laugh, then turned to Robert. Honestly, some people just shouldn't be traveling if they can't even speak proper English. The words hung in the air, a sudden jarring discord in the pre-flight hum. Amelia froze her hand, still reaching for her boarding pass, which Robert was handing back to her. The blood rushed to her ears. It wasn't the first time she had encountered such ignorance, such casual racism, but it still stung. A deep breath. She reminded herself of her professionalism, her position. This woman was beneath her notice. She turned slowly, her gaze calm, though a fire was beginning to ignite deep within her eyes. "Excuse me?" Amelia asked, her voice low, controlled, but with an edge that was unmistakable. Brenda, emboldened by Amelia's controlled reaction, straightened her shoulders. "You heard me, sweetheart. Your accent is quite thick. Makes it hard to understand. Just saying. Maybe stick to your own country's airlines, eh?" She smirked, then glanced at the young couple behind Amelia, expecting them to join in her amusement. Instead, they looked uncomfortable, exchanging worried glances. Amelia's eyes narrowed slightly. "My accent, ma'am, is a part of who I am, and I assure you my English is perfectly adequate for any communication required on this flight, or indeed in my profession." Brenda scoffed. "Oh, a profession, she says. What are you, a tour guide? Or do you clean planes?" Her tone was dismissive, laced with thinly veiled contempt. She made no attempt to lower her voice, ensuring everyone in the immediate vicinity could hear her disparaging remarks. Just then, David Miller, a tall, distinguished man with a neatly trimmed gray beard, approached the gate, his boarding pass in hand. He spotted Amelia, then the tense interaction. His usual cheerful demeanor immediately dissolved into a look of concern. He recognized the look on Amelia's face, a controlled fury that rarely surfaced. "Everything all right, Amelia?" David asked, stepping closer. Amelia didn't break eye contact with Brenda. "Perfectly fine, David. Just a minor misunderstanding." Brenda, sensing another person joining the conversation, puffed up her chest. "Oh, is this your friend come to defend your charming dialect?" She looked David up and down, clearly assessing him, and finding him in her estimation of slightly higher social standing than Amelia, but still associated with someone other. David, a man who had seen his share of ignorant passengers in his years in the FAA, felt a familiar surge of irritation. He was about to speak when Amelia, with remarkable composure, reached down. And then she saw it. The small, laminated card glistening subtly under the gate's artificial light. Her FAA identification. It must have fallen when she pulled out her wallet. A slow, knowing smile began to form on Amelia's lips, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a smile of dawning realization of something akin to poetic justice. She calmly bent down and picked up the card. It was her official FAA badge, complete with her photo employee number and title, Senior Air Traffic Control Specialist. The bold blue FAA logo stood out clearly. Brenda Holloway, still smirking, watched Amelia pick up the card. "Lost something dear, your library card, perhaps?" she quipped, oblivious to the impending shift in power dynamics. Amelia straightened up the card held deliberately in her hand, visible for all to see. Her gaze, which had been merely calm, now held a glint of steel. She looked directly into Brenda's eyes. "No, ma'am," Amelia said, her voice now devoid of any accent, clear and authoritative, the underlying power of her position beginning to surface. "Just a reminder of my profession." She let the words hang in the air, a silent prelude to the storm she was about to unleash. The smile was gone, replaced by a cool, unwavering stare. Brenda's smirk faltered slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face as she noticed the official-looking card. But it was too late. The gears of karma, so often slow, were about to spin at dizzying speed. Brenda Holloway's initial reaction was a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, a government ID. How quaint. Are you going to threaten me with a parking ticket?" She sneered, attempting to regain control of the crumbling interaction. Her audience, however, was no longer amused. The young couple behind Amelia had stopped whispering, their eyes wide with apprehension. Robert, the gate agent, had noticed the shift in Amelia's demeanor and the appearance of the official ID, and a look of dawning horror spread across his face. David Miller, meanwhile, had crossed his arms, a grim satisfaction beginning to settle on his features. He knew Amelia, and he knew what was coming. Amelia slowly tucked her FAA ID back into her wallet, her movements deliberate and precise. She then produced a second, slightly larger badge, her FAA credential that specifically denoted her authority to act in an official capacity on a flight if necessary. This one had a more prominent Authorized Personnel banner across the top. She didn't display it to Brenda, but rather held it discreetly, ensuring David and Robert could see it. It was a silent, powerful signal. "Ma'am." Amelia began, her voice now perfectly modulated, every trace of her accent gone, replaced by the crisp, clear enunciation of a seasoned professional. "My name is Amelia Davies. I am a senior air traffic control specialist with the Federal Aviation Administration. My colleague David Miller is an FAA aviation safety inspector." She gestured briefly to David, who gave a curt nod. Brenda's jaw dropped slightly. The color drained from her face, replaced by a pale, sickly hue. The swagger, the dismissiveness evaporated instantly, leaving behind a woman suddenly stripped of her perceived superiority. "What the FAA?" she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "That's correct." Amelia continued, her gaze unwavering. "And I believe you just made several disparaging remarks towards me, not only mocking my accent, but also questioning my profession and suitability for air travel, all within earshot of other passengers and airline personnel." Robert, the gate agent, took a tentative step forward. "Ms. Davies, I am so incredibly sorry. I didn't realize." Amelia raised a hand to silence him. "It's quite all right, Robert. This is not your fault. Ma'am," she turned back to Brenda, whose eyes were darting nervously around, looking for an escape for someone to intervene. There was no one. "I am on official government business traveling to a conference in Washington, D.C. As an FAA officer, I am bound by certain regulations and responsibilities even when I am a passenger. One of those responsibilities is to ensure the safety and professionalism of the air travel environment." Brenda finally found her voice, a desperate pleading tone. But I was just joking. It was just a little banter. You can't be serious." "Do I look like I'm joking, ma'am?" Amelia's voice was like ice. "Your banter involved racial undertones and public harassment of a federal officer. That is not acceptable. Furthermore, your disruption has created an uncomfortable and potentially hostile environment for other passengers and airline staff. This constitutes a violation of several airline policies and potentially federal regulations regarding unruly passengers." David stepped forward, his voice a calm, authoritative counterpoint to Amelia's chilling pronouncements. "Ms. Holloway, an FAA officer, has the authority to make judgment calls regarding flight safety and passenger conduct. Any behavior deemed to be disruptive or threatening, even verbally, can have serious consequences." Brenda's eyes darted between Amelia and David, a cold dread seizing her. The carefully constructed facade of her entitled world was crumbling around her. She looked at the steadily shrinking boarding line, the impatient faces of those waiting, and then back at Amelia, who stood tall and unyielding. What are you going to do?" Brenda whispered, her voice barely audible. Amelia took a slow, deliberate breath. This was the moment. The decision had been made the instant Brenda's cruel words had left her lips. She wasn't just doing this for herself, but for every person who had ever been subjected to such casual bigotry, for every professional who had been dismissed based on their appearance or accent. "Here's what's going to happen, Ms. Holloway," Amelia stated, her voice resonating with an undeniable finality. "As a senior air traffic control specialist and an authorized FAA officer, I deem your behavior to be a direct impediment to my ability to travel without harassment, and more importantly, a potential threat to the orderly conduct of this flight. Under my authority, and in consultation with Inspector Miller, I am informing the airline that this flight cannot depart with you on board." A gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Robert's eyes widened even further, his mouth agape. Brenda looked as though she had been struck. You can't," she shrieked, her voice rising in panic. "You can't just cancel my flight. I have a connecting flight. I have a meeting." "I am not canceling the flight entirely, Ms. Holloway," Amelia clarified, her voice still calm, still unwavering. "I am simply stating that I, as an FAA officer, will not proceed with my travel on a flight where a passenger has demonstrated such a blatant disregard for respectful conduct and has directly harassed a federal officer. Therefore, until you are removed from this flight and appropriate documentation of your behavior is submitted, I will not board. And if I do not board, this flight cannot depart, as I am required to be on it for operational reasons pertaining to my mission to Washington, D.C. My presence is tied to the flight's clearance." This was a slight embellishment of her actual power in this specific scenario. While she could report Brenda and cause delays, the direct cancellation of a flight because she refused to board was a powerful and legally gray leverage play. But in the heat of the moment with her authority, it was entirely believable and highly effective. David, sensing the strategic genius of Amelia's declaration, stepped in to reinforce it. The FAA takes the well-being of its officers very seriously, especially when they are on official duty. Any situation that compromises an officer's ability to fulfill their duties, even if it's simply experiencing harassment, can be grounds for immediate action. Ms. Davies' presence on this flight is in fact integral to a sensitive, time-critical FAA mission. We cannot risk any further disruption or compromise of her focus. This was a masterful stroke, implying that Amelia's presence wasn't just for a conference, but for something far more critical, tying the flight's very ability to depart to her boarding. It was a bluff, yes, but a very convincing one, delivered with the full weight of the FAA behind it. Brenda was speechless, her face a mask of utter disbelief and growing fear. Robert, the gate agent, quickly pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed his supervisor. He knew the implications of an FAA officer making such a declaration. This was far beyond a simple passenger dispute. This was a federal matter. Within minutes, a stern-faced airline supervisor, a woman named Sharon Carter, arrived at the gate, her expression grave. Robert quickly explained the situation, pointing to Amelia, David, and a now desperate Brenda. Sharon listened, her eyes occasionally flicking to Amelia's composed face, then to Brenda's tear-streaked one. When Robert finished, Sharon turned directly to Amelia. "Ms. Davies, is what Robert has stated accurate? Are you an FAA officer? And is this passenger's behavior truly preventing you from boarding this flight?" Amelia met Sharon's gaze calmly. Yes, Miss Carter, it is. Her discriminatory remarks and aggressive posture towards me, a federal officer on official duty, have created an unacceptable environment. I cannot, in good conscience, board this flight knowing that such a hostile element remains. My focus must be entirely on my mission, not on enduring harassment from a fellow passenger. Until Ms. Holloway is removed, I cannot guarantee my ability to fulfill my responsibilities, and therefore this flight cannot depart with me on board. Sharon Carter, a veteran of countless difficult passenger interactions, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. An FAA officer effectively grounding a flight, even indirectly due to a disruptive passenger, was a nightmare scenario. It meant potential fines for the airline investigations and a cascade of bureaucratic headaches. There was only one course of action. She turned to Brenda, her voice devoid of sympathy. Ms. Holloway, due to your unacceptable and disruptive behavior towards a federal officer, you are being deplaned. Your ticket will be canceled, and you will not be permitted to rebook on another United Airlines flight today. Furthermore, this incident will be reported to federal authorities. Brenda let out a small, choked sound, a mixture of outrage and genuine terror. But this is ridiculous! You can't do this! She screamed, her voice cracking. I'll sue! I'll call my lawyer! You have no right! Amelia stepped forward, her voice cutting through Brenda's desperate protests. Ma'am, you forfeited your rights the moment you decided to publicly insult and harass a federal officer. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise it. She looked at Sharon. Ms. Carter, please ensure this individual is escorted off the premises and that all necessary documentation is filed. Inspector Miller and I will provide our statements. Brenda, finally understanding the absolute unyielding authority she was facing, crumpled. Two airport security officers who had arrived with Sharon gently but firmly took her by the arms. As they led her away, a collective sigh of relief mixed with awe swept through the gate area. Passengers looked at Amelia with newfound respect, some offering small, grateful smiles. Amelia simply watched Brenda disappear down the corridor, her face impassive. The storm had passed, leaving behind a profound silence. David placed a hand on her shoulder. Well done, Amelia. Well done. Amelia looked at him, a flicker of exhaustion in her eyes, but also a deep sense of satisfaction. Some lessons, David, are best learned the hard way. The flight having been delayed by approximately 45 minutes due to the confrontation, and Brenda's removal was finally ready to board. Amelia and David, with their official presence, were ushered onto the plane first, leaving a stunned gate agent and a humbled airline supervisor to deal with the aftermath of Brenda Holloway's very public downfall. As Amelia and David settled into their first-class seats, 12A and 12B, a palpable shift in the plane's atmosphere was evident. The initial tension had given way to a quiet hum of subdued conversations, punctuated by the occasional discreet glance in Amelia's direction. News travels fast, especially in the contained environment of an airplane gate. Many passengers had witnessed the exchange, or at least its dramatic conclusion, and the story was already spreading through the cabin like wildfire. The flight attendant, a seasoned professional named Christine, approached them with a solicitous smile. Ms. Davies, Inspector Miller, please accept our sincerest apologies for the unfortunate incident at the gate. We've been fully briefed by Ms. Carter. Can I get you anything? Perhaps a glass of water or something stronger? Amelia offered a small, polite smile. Thank you, Christine. A glass of sparkling water would be perfect. And please inform the captain that Inspector Miller and I are now on board and ready for departure. Immediately, ma'am, Christine responded, her tone deferential. She quickly returned with the sparkling water and a small plate of snacks, clearly attempting to make amends. David leaned back, taking a sip of his coffee. You handled that with remarkable restraint, Amelia. I might have been tempted to, well, let's just say my patience has worn thinner over the years. Amelia looked out the window, watching the ground crew make their final preparations. Restraint is key, David, especially when you hold this kind of authority. It's not about personal revenge. It's about upholding the standards of our profession and ensuring a safe environment for everyone. She paused, a thoughtful expression on her face, though I admit there was a certain satisfaction in seeing her face when she realized the consequences of her actions. David chuckled. Understatement of the year. She was absolutely speechless. And that time-critical FAA mission line, brilliant. You had Sharon Carter practically saluting you. Amelia allowed herself a small, genuine smile. A bit of strategic dramatization never hurts, does it? The core truth remains harassment of an officer on duty, even as a passenger, simply cannot be tolerated. It sets a dangerous precedent. The plane slowly pushed back from the gate, the familiar rumble of the engines filling the cabin. As they taxied towards the runway, Amelia reflected on the encounter. It wasn't the first time her accent had been a target, but it was certainly the most public and consequential instance. It served as a stark reminder that even in a highly professional setting, prejudice could surface in the most unexpected ways. Meanwhile, Brenda Holloway was experiencing a very different kind of journey. After being escorted off the premises, she was taken to a small, sterile office where she was informed that her United Airlines ticket was not only canceled, but she was also flagged in their system as an unruly passenger. This meant no rebooking on United for the foreseeable future, and a strong likelihood of other airlines refusing her as well once the incident report was widely circulated. To make matters worse, the airport security officers informed her that the incident involving a federal officer would require a formal report to the airport police department and potentially to a federal prosecutor if Amelia or David chose to press charges for harassment or obstruction of a federal officer on duty. The joking had just turned into a very serious legal predicament. Brenda, who had always navigated life with an air of unassailable privilege, was now utterly bewildered and terrified. Her calls to her very important friends and her high-powered lawyer were met with polite but firm explanations that interfering with a federal investigation, especially one involving the FAA, was not something they could easily dismiss or wave away. Her carefully constructed world of influence and immunity was cracking under the weight of her own hubris. Back on the plane, the flight was now airborne, soaring above the sprawling landscape of Los Angeles. Amelia, having put the incident behind her, began to review her conference notes. David was engrossed in a novel. The other passengers settled into their routines, the drama of the gate slowly fading into memory. However, the whispers continued. In the economy section, a young woman named Chloe, who had witnessed Brenda's initial outburst, was recounting the story to her seatmate, a wide-eyed young man named Ethan. "You should have seen it, Ethan," Chloe whispered excitedly. "This woman Brenda was just relentlessly mocking her accent. So rude, and then the other lady, Amelia, just pulls out this ID and suddenly the whole flight is almost grounded. She was like, 'I'm an FAA officer and this flight isn't going anywhere until she is gone.'" Chloe embellished slightly, but the core drama remained. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "Wow, talk about karma. Who would have thought?" "Right," Chloe agreed. And she was so calm about it, just absolutely ice cold. It was amazing. That Brenda lady, she just totally deserved it. These conversations, though hushed, created a narrative within the plane. Amelia Davies was not just a passenger. She was an unsung hero, a quiet force who had stood up for herself, and in doing so had delivered a satisfying blow against prejudice. The incident, far from being just a minor delay, became a legend in the making amongst the passengers of flight UA 743. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Amelia leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. She knew the reports would be filed, the incident documented. She knew there would be questions, perhaps even an inquiry, into the exact extent of her actions. But she had no regrets. Justice, she believed, had been served swiftly and unequivocally. The small card she had picked up from the floor had not just been a reminder of her profession. It had been a key unlocking a door to accountability that Brenda Holloway had never imagined existed. The flight to Washington, D.C. continued a journey of thousands of miles, but for one passenger, the real journey, one of reckoning and consequence, had already begun abruptly back at the gate in Los Angeles. The incident at LAX was more than just a public spectacle. It was a catalyst setting off a series of events that would profoundly impact Brenda Holloway's life. While Amelia Davies and David Miller were landing in Washington, D.C. to attend their conference, oblivious to the precise mechanisms of karma Brenda was now facing. The gears of justice were grinding swiftly. The official report filed by United Airlines supervisor Sharon Carter detailing Brenda's unruly and discriminatory behavior towards a federal officer on official duty quickly made its way up the corporate ladder. United, eager to avoid any negative publicity or potential legal entanglements with the FAA, took a hard stance. Not only was Brenda's ticket canceled without refund, but her frequent flyer status, which she had proudly flaunted, was revoked. A permanent ban from flying with United Airlines was also initiated, a decision that would be shared with other major carriers through industry databases. But the airline's actions were just the beginning. The airport police department receiving the report had a duty to investigate any potential federal offenses. A detective officer, Brian Reed, was assigned to the case. He contacted Amelia Davies and David Miller in D.C., taking their formal statements over a secure video call. Their accounts were clear, concise, and damning. They both stressed the discriminatory nature of Brenda's remarks and the disruptive impact on their ability to perform their duties as federal officers. While they chose not to press for federal charges of obstruction at that moment, they reserved the right to do so, placing a heavy cloud of uncertainty over Brenda. Officer Reed then contacted Brenda. Her initial defiant and indignant attitude quickly crumbled under his calm but persistent questioning. She tried to downplay her remarks, claiming she was misunderstood, that it was a joke gone wrong. But the statements from Amelia, David, Robert, the gate agent, and even several corroborating passenger accounts painted a different picture. "Ms. Holloway," Officer Reed stated plainly during their phone call, "your behavior has been documented by multiple witnesses, including federal officers. Your claims of joking are not aligning with the reports. We have a clear record of harassment. While Ms. Davies and Mr. Miller have for now chosen not to pursue federal charges, this incident is now on your permanent record. Any future disruptions on an airline could easily escalate into a federal offense. Consider this a very serious warning." The phone call ended, leaving Brenda reeling. The permanent record felt like a brand searing into her carefully cultivated image. Beyond the official channels, the story fueled by social media began to spread. Chloe, the young woman from the economy section, had posted a detailed account of the incident on her Instagram stories, carefully omitting names, but vividly describing the entitled passenger and the badass FAA officer. The story went viral within her circle, then beyond. Soon, local news outlets in Los Angeles picked up snippets referring to an unruly passenger incident involving federal officials at LAX, without naming Brenda, but enough details to spark public curiosity. Brenda worked as a senior marketing executive for a boutique luxury brand, Elysian Goods. Her job relied heavily on networking, maintaining a flawless public image, and frequent travel, often internationally, to meet high-net-worth clients and attend exclusive events. She was considered the face of the brand's upscale clientele relations. Her direct supervisor, a shrewd but socially conscious woman named Eleanor Jenkins, caught wind of the whispers. One of Eleanor's junior associates, a recent graduate who followed several local news accounts, discreetly brought the LAX incident to her attention, noting the striking similarities to Brenda's description. Eleanor, deeply concerned, initiated a discreet internal inquiry. While Brenda's name wasn't officially mentioned in the initial reports, Eleanor knew Brenda was scheduled to fly that day from LAX to DC, and then on to New York. The pieces fit too perfectly. A few days after the incident, Brenda was back in her office in Los Angeles feeling the lingering humiliation. She received an email requesting a meeting with Eleanor Jenkins and the head of human resources, Mr. Patrick O'Connell. The tone of the email was formal, almost chilling. When she walked into the tastefully decorated meeting room, Eleanor and Patrick were already seated, their expressions serious. There was no usual preamble, no pleasantries. Eleanor began. "Brenda, we've become aware of an incident at LAX earlier this week involving yourself. We have received some very concerning reports." Brenda immediately went on the defensive. "It was a misunderstanding, Eleanor, a complete overreaction by a very sensitive person. I was just making a joke." Patrick O'Connell interjected, his voice firm. "Brenda, the reports, including an official airline incident report, describe public harassment and discriminatory remarks directed at a federal officer. This is not a joke. This is a serious breach of professional conduct, and more importantly, it reflects extremely poorly on Elysian Goods." Eleanor continued. "Our brand stands for inclusivity, respect, and global sophistication. Your alleged actions are in direct conflict with our core values. We cannot have a senior executive who represents us globally embroiled in public incidents of this nature, especially when they involve discrimination. This could severely damage our reputation and alienate our diverse client base." Brenda felt a cold wave of panic. But there's no proof. No one knows it was me." Patrick sighed. "Brenda, the internet knows. Social media knows. The airport authorities know. And frankly, people in our industry talk. We've had calls, discreet inquiries. The damage, whether you acknowledge it or not, is already being done." The meeting ended with Brenda being placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full internal investigation. Her work phone and laptop were confiscated. Her access to company systems was revoked. She walked out of the meeting room feeling dizzy, the weight of her actions finally crashing down upon her. The ripple effect was merciless. Her usual glamorous life, filled with exclusive events, first-class travel, and powerful connections, was suddenly contracting, shrinking into a bleak landscape of isolation and uncertainty. Her friends, often fair-weather companions, began to distance themselves, wary of being associated with the growing scandal. The social media whispers, while not naming her, were clear enough for those in their tight-knit circles to piece together. Brenda Holloway, the woman who believed her status and privilege made her untouchable, was learning a harsh lesson. The casual cruelty she had inflicted upon Amelia Davies at a boarding gate had returned to her magnified and relentless in every aspect of her life. The once bright future she envisioned for herself was now shrouded in the long, dark shadow of a public humiliation, an airline ban, and a potentially career-ending scandal. The karma long overdue was hitting hard, and it was just beginning to truly sink in. The administrative leave from Elysian Goods stretched into weeks, then a month. Brenda's initial defiance had given way to a gnawing anxiety. Her attempts to spin the narrative or dismiss the incident were futile. The internal investigation at Elysian Goods unearthed not only the official airline report, but also testimonies from her colleagues and subordinates revealing a pattern of dismissive and occasionally condescending behavior. The unruly passenger incident at LAX became the final damning piece of evidence that illuminated a deeper problem. Then came the formal letter termination. Elysian Goods, citing a breach of conduct damage to brand reputation and a hostile work environment, had fired her. The loss of her prestigious job, the hefty salary, the company car, and the expense accounts felt like a physical blow. Her professional life, which she had so meticulously crafted, lay in ruins. Compounding her woes, the airline ban was proving to be a nightmare. Brenda had planned a luxury vacation to the Maldives with a group of friends, a trip she had been looking forward to for months. When she tried to book flights on various airlines, she was met with polite but firm refusals. Her name flagged in the industry database made her persona non grata in the skies. Her friends increasingly exasperated by her inability to travel, and her constant complaints eventually went without her. The isolation began to truly sink in. Her once vibrant social circle began to shrink dramatically. Phone calls went unanswered, invitations stopped coming. The hushed whispers had solidified into an undeniable truth. Brenda Holloway was that woman who mocked the FAA officer. People, especially those in positions of influence or who valued their own reputations, wanted no part of her. Her lawyer, a high-priced but ultimately pragmatic individual named Mr. Davies, no relation to Amelia, advised her to lay low, offering little hope of overturning the airline ban or regaining her job. "Brenda," he had said bluntly, "you insulted a federal officer. You really don't have a leg to stand on here." To make matters worse, a local news blog picking up on the viral social media posts finally identified Brenda Holloway by name after obtaining redacted public records related to the airline incident. The article, while carefully phrased to avoid libel, painted a clear picture of her actions and the subsequent professional and personal fallout. The headline, "LA Executive's Disrespectful Rant Grounds Her Career," sent shockwaves through her remaining connections. Brenda, once a social butterfly, found herself trapped in her opulent home, increasingly alone. The silence in the sprawling house was deafening. The designer clothes, the expensive cars, the luxury possessions she had accumulated now felt hollow symbols of a life she was rapidly losing. She spent her days scrolling through social media, seeing her former friends enjoying events without her, their posts a constant, painful reminder of her ostracization. Her parents, wealthy but stern individuals, were deeply embarrassed. While they didn't cut her off entirely, their financial support came with heavy lectures and overt disappointment. "We raised you better than this, Brenda," her father had admonished her during a tense video call. "Such behavior is unbecoming of our family name." Brenda tried to rationalize, to deflect, to blame Amelia for her misfortune. "She overreacted. She used her power to ruin my life," she'd mutter to herself, pacing her living room. But deep down, a seed of doubt, of terrible self-awareness was beginning to sprout. One afternoon, in a fit of despair, she drove aimlessly, eventually finding herself near LAX. The sight of planes soaring overhead, taking off to distant, exciting places, filled her with a profound sense of loss. She remembered the thrill of boarding, the anticipation of a new destination, the sense of importance her travel often conveyed. Now that world was closed off to her, a direct consequence of her own venomous words. The financial strain also began to set in. Without her substantial income, maintaining her lavish lifestyle was unsustainable. Mortgage payments on her expensive home became a source of constant worry. Her credit cards, once effortlessly paid off, now carried growing balances. The reality of her new diminished circumstances was brutally stark. Meanwhile, Amelia Davies was thriving. The conference in D.C. had been a success. Her presentation with David Miller was well received, and she had gained valuable networking opportunities. The incident at LAX, while a brief moment of unpleasantness, had reinforced her reputation as a strong, principled professional. When she returned to her office, her colleagues greeted her with knowing smiles and quiet admiration. Her supervisor commended her handling of the situation, noting the professionalism and exemplary conduct under duress. Amelia didn't dwell on Brenda Holloway. She had done what she needed to do. Her focus was on her career, on her contributions to aviation safety, and on building a positive and inclusive environment within the FAA. She had simply been doing her job, and in doing so, had inadvertently delivered a powerful lesson to someone who desperately needed it. Brenda, on the other hand, was descending into a vortex of regret and isolation. The echo of her mocking laughter at the boarding gate, once a sound of self-satisfaction, now haunted her, a chilling reminder of the moment her life had irrevocably fractured. The karma, precise and unyielding, was dismantling her world piece by piece, leaving her with nothing but the bitter taste of her own prejudice. The full weight of her actions, once seemingly insignificant, had become an anchor, dragging her down into an abyss of her own making. Months turned into a year. Brenda Holloway's life had undergone a radical and painful transformation. Her expensive house was eventually foreclosed upon, as she couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. She moved into a modest apartment in a less desirable part of town, far from her previous upscale neighborhoods. Her luxury car was repossessed. She took a series of temporary low-paying jobs, retail, then administrative assistant roles, none of which offered the prestige or income she was accustomed to. The ban from United and effectively all major airlines meant her dreams of international travel were completely dashed. The social isolation persisted. Her former friends had truly vanished. She spent her evenings alone, watching television or reading, a stark contrast to her previous life of glamorous dinners and parties. The constant internal narrative of victimhood, however, was slowly beginning to crack. The sheer scale of her misfortune, undeniably linked to that one arrogant moment at LAX, forced a reluctant introspection. She started to see the casual cruelty of her past through a different lens. The way she had dismissed service staff, the cutting remarks she'd made about people's appearances or backgrounds, the constant need to assert her superiority, it all began to surface ugly and undeniable. The incident with Amelia, initially viewed as an overreaction by a sensitive person, now appeared as a direct consequence of her own arrogance and prejudice. One rainy Saturday, Brenda found herself waiting at a bus stop, an experience that would have been unthinkable a year prior. She was bundled in a worn coat, heading to a part-time job at a local bookstore. The bus was delayed, and she was growing increasingly frustrated. Then a familiar voice, a voice she had heard only once, but had burned into her memory, spoke nearby. "Excuse me, is this the number 30 bus to downtown?" Brenda looked up. Standing under the meager shelter of the bus stop was Amelia Davies. She looked as composed and professional as Brenda remembered, though dressed more casually in a stylish trench coat and practical boots. She was holding a small child's hand, a bright-eyed little girl, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, who was clutching a colorful teddy bear. Amelia's hair was still pulled back, and her eyes, though kind, still held that same quiet intelligence. Brenda's heart lurched. A wave of shame, hot and overwhelming, washed over her. She quickly turned her face away, hoping Amelia wouldn't recognize her. She was a shadow of her former self. Thinner, her once immaculate appearance now faded, her expensive clothes replaced by generic, practical attire. Amelia, however, was focused on her daughter Chloe, named after her husband's grandmother, who was excitedly pointing at a puddle. "No, sweetie, don't step in that." Amelia chuckled softly, her voice still carrying that beautiful, subtle lilt that Brenda had so cruelly mocked. The bus finally arrived, pulling up with a hiss of air brakes. As people boarded, Amelia and her daughter moved closer. Brenda, still trying to remain unnoticed, found herself directly in front of Amelia as they shuffled onto the bus. Their eyes met. For a split second, a flicker of recognition, then surprise crossed Amelia's face. She paused, her gaze holding Brenda's. There was no triumph, no malice, just a quiet, almost sad understanding. Brenda could feel her face flush scarlet. "Amelia," Brenda whispered the name, feeling foreign on her tongue. It was a shaky, almost desperate sound. Amelia nodded slowly. "Ms. Holloway." Her voice was soft, devoid of any harshness. "It's quite a change." Brenda could only nod, tears pricking at her eyes. The humiliation was immense, but it was coupled with something else. A profound sense of having been judged and found wanting not by Amelia, but by the universe itself. I am so incredibly sorry." Brenda choked out the words, catching in her throat. It wasn't just for that day at the airport. It was for all the accumulated arrogance, all the prejudice that had defined her for so long. The apology was raw, genuine, and utterly unexpected. Amelia looked at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Her daughter, feeling the sudden tension, tugged on Amelia's coat. "It was a long time ago, Ms. Holloway," Amelia finally said, her voice still gentle. "I hope you have found some peace since then." She didn't offer forgiveness, not directly. She didn't need to. Her words implied an understanding of the journey Brenda must have endured, the hard lessons learned. Brenda shook her head. "No peace, just lessons, hard lessons." When she looked down at Chloe, then back at Amelia. "You were right, about everything. The bus conductor called out for fares." Amelia, with a slight nod, guided her daughter past Brenda paying their fare and moving to an open seat further back. She didn't look back. Brenda paid her own fare, feeling a hollow ache in her chest. She found a seat alone, her gaze fixed on Amelia and her daughter in the distance. The encounter was brief, less than a minute, but it was profoundly impactful for Brenda. Amelia's quiet dignity, her gentle nature even after all that had happened, stood in stark contrast to Brenda's own past self. Amelia had not gloated, not judged further. She had simply acknowledged the truth and offered a quiet hope for peace. For the first time, Brenda felt a genuine shift within her. It wasn't about the job, the money, or the social standing anymore. It was about something far more fundamental: respect, empathy, and humility. The image of Amelia, a successful, confident woman raising her child with grace, while Brenda was struggling to even afford bus fare, was a powerful mirror reflecting the consequences of her past choices. The karma had not just hit back. It had reshaped her. It had stripped away her entitlements, her false sense of superiority, and left her with a raw, painful opportunity for genuine growth. The long, hard road of self-reflection was finally yielding a glimmer of true understanding. Years passed. The encounter at the bus stop, though brief, remained etched in Brenda Holloway's memory. It was a turning point, solidifying the lessons she had been so brutally forced to learn. The shame lingered, but it was slowly replaced by a quiet resolve to live differently. Brenda never saw Amelia Davies again. Amelia continued her distinguished career with the FAA, rising through the ranks, her expertise and calm leadership admired by her colleagues. Her daughter Chloe grew into a bright, confident young girl, completely unaware of the dramatic encounter that had, in a strange way, shaped a small part of her mother's journey. Amelia occasionally thought of the woman at the bus stop, a fleeting memory of a life altered, but she had long ago moved on, focusing on her present and future. Brenda, meanwhile, embraced her new, humbler life. She continued working at the bookstore, finding an unexpected solace in the quiet environment and the world of stories. She discovered a genuine love for literature, something her previous fast-paced, material-driven life had never allowed her to appreciate. She eventually saved enough to take night classes, pursuing a degree in library science. The process was slow, arduous, and often frustrating. But for the first time in her life, Brenda felt a sense of purpose beyond superficial achievements. She learned to ride public transportation with grace, to budget carefully, and to find joy in simple things. A good book, a quiet walk in the park, a genuine conversation with a colleague. The experience of social isolation had taught her the true value of human connection. She made new friends, people who knew nothing of her former life, who valued her for her kindness, her growing empathy, and her quiet strength. She volunteered at a local community center, helping children with their reading. She found immense satisfaction in contributing, in being helpful, rather than being the one served. She never fully escaped the consequences of her past. The airline ban remained in effect, a constant reminder of the depth of her misjudgment. She still occasionally caught a glimpse of an article online about that LA executive who caused a scene, but the sting was less potent now. She had learned to accept it, to own her mistakes, and to understand that some actions carry irreversible consequences. Brenda Holloway was no longer the entitled, dismissive woman who had mocked a stranger's accent. The superficial layers of wealth and status had been stripped away, revealing a person capable of genuine growth, humility, and compassion. It was a transformation forged in the fires of public humiliation and personal loss, a testament to the harsh but ultimately redemptive power of karma. She often thought of Amelia Davies not with resentment, but with a profound sense of gratitude. Amelia, in her quiet strength and unwavering professionalism, had been the instrument of Brenda's awakening. The FAA officer had not just grounded a flight. She had indirectly grounded Brenda Holloway, forcing her to confront the ugliness within and ultimately to rebuild herself from the ground up. Her story was an unwritten epilogue to the dramatic encounter at LAX, a quiet narrative of personal redemption, unfolding far from the spotlight. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that finally teach us how to truly fly. And so the story of Amelia Davies and Brenda Holloway comes to a close, a vivid reminder that words, even seemingly casual ones, carry immense power. For Amelia, it was a moment where her quiet dignity and professional authority shone through, delivering a powerful lesson without ever raising her voice. For Brenda, it was a catastrophic turning point, a dramatic fall from grace that stripped away everything she thought defined her, forcing her on a painful but ultimately transformative journey of self-reflection and humility. This isn't just a tale of karma, it's a testament to the quiet strength of those who face prejudice and a stark warning about the unseen consequences of our actions. What do you think about this incredible story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a similar moment where someone's true character was revealed? Let us know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas and powerful narratives. Your support helps us bring these impactful stories to life.